All right, guys, how you doing? I'm Adam Higgins. Welcome to the HIghRoad Solution, HIghRoad U webinar. And today we're going to be talking about building digital ecosystems, right? And so we're going to talk about building these systems to really deliver ROI. I had a talk just a couple weeks ago. We did another webinar on e-commerce systems, and we're going to build a little bit on that. But today is really about all of those digital networks, those digital platforms that marketers are using to really deliver an experience to their constituents, to their members, to push them down a journey to purchase something, and then hopefully to see some return on that investment of all these different touch points and all these different properties and platforms that you're using to generate activity and generate revenue, to really see if those things are working, right? And so for a long time, marketers have been doing a lot of work on generating activity, but had a difficult time with actually seeing if things were converting and if things were actually generating some revenue. You had some suspicions, but really didn't have any concrete way of really seeing some of those metrics and analytics come through. And it's always been difficult from maybe an email level to really see how much revenue that generated, or maybe from a webinar, how much revenue that put into your bottom line. And so what we're going to talk about today is how do all of those systems, and how can you get all those systems integrated and working together in an ecosystem that helps you to really deliver some return on investment and deliver some insightful analytics that will help you, put analytics against some of the goals that you have for your organization. So what we're going to do today, got an agenda here, and it's really, we're going to define what an ecosystem. I always like to start with a high level first. And we're going to start by defining what an ecosystem is and what's that look like in terms of a marketing and digital perspective. And then we're going to talk about being multi-channel versus omni-channel, right? And there's a distinct difference between those two. Very, very different strategy and approach between multi and omni. And so we'll talk a little bit about that, and we'll talk about how that impacts that buyer's journey, whether you're going from a multi-channel approach or an omni-channel approach, how that affects that buyer's journey. Because we really want to be on an omni-channel marketing strategy, and how that plays into a buyer purchasing something from you. And then when you're doing the buyer's journey, you want to maximize all of those different channels. And those channels have to, you have to have the same voice and have to have the same brand, if you will, across all those different channels that you're communicating with your constituents. And so when you're delivering messages, they have to be timely and contextual, right? And so being timely and contextual is very important in the buyer's journey. And we'll talk about that, and then combining that with lead scoring, which is helpful because lead scoring allows you to know if you're going to be timely with that specific buyer. And then we'll talk a little bit about the reporting and the conversions, right? And so we got about 6 topics to kind of tackle today, and so within the next hour or so. And so we'll spend a good portion really defining that ecosystem. But I think this is a really timely discussion about all of these different platforms and how you get them working, because I think we got some analytics back from our state of the digital marketing, is that a lot of marketers are using different things to accomplish what they need, and they're on different platforms. And so tackling this problem is very timely, and seeing how you can really integrate your ecosystem together. And so let's spend a little time defining what the ecosystem is and how you can somewhat leverage all of your digital channels, right? And so you got all these different areas where you're at, social, email, you got webinars and so forth. And how do you leverage all those and get them working together in unison and trying to make them work and center them around the actual customer, actual buyer. And so we'll talk a lot about how that ecosystem plays nicely together. And so I did a quick search in Google just to see what the definition of ecosystem was. And I already knew what it was, but I just wanted to see what the real definition was. And so what came up first was a complex network of or interconnected system. And I thought that was spot on when it came to all of the different software platforms that marketers are using today, right? And so there is this complex network of different things that people are using to accomplish their goals. And the key thing about an ecosystem is that they're connected, right? And you think about networking, or you think about a person networking at an event, right? You're one person going out and trying to touch as many people as you can in that time frame, so that you can, maximize, some type of value and get some ROI out of that event, right? And so a complex, network, right, of all these different platforms and how they're interconnected together to make or demonstrate some value with your constituents as well as for your organization. And so we show this diagram quite a bit at HIghRoad, and this is our marketing technology stack diagram. And what I like about it, it just illustrates how many different platforms you potentially could use, right? And the customer doesn't know all these platforms are there, but these are all the different products and platforms and systems that we're using together, really to try to create this, relevant, timely experience with your constituents and with your members. And so you have your members sitting at the heart of this stack, and everything has to be timely and has to be relevant, but you're using those behaviors to kind of dictate what some of these touch points will be, right? And you may have a newsletter, you got renewals going out, you have some events, then you have announcements, then you have some landing pages, then you got your e-commerce platform that's generating revenue, and then you got your CMS with blogs and, kind of your, kind of standard, departmental pages inside the CMS. And so you got all of these systems, but the key thing is that they all need to work together, and not only from a technology perspective, but also from a marketing perspective as well, right? Because all of these components and all of these touch points have to have the same voice, right? And, they can't be siloed in any way, or you get a inconsistent experience, or this member gets an inconsistent experience with your organization, right? And so you want that experience to be consistent across all the different platforms. And of late, what we've seen is this integrated stack. And the key thing here is that what we see now, and we spun these up for the last few customers and clients that we've worked with, that the AMS is sitting at the heart of the whole system, right? This is managing your membership, right, and managing a lot of the constituents that touch your membership. And then you have a marketing automation platform that's managing all of those different touch points, right, and aggregating all of those analytics that are either coming from the website, coming from the different landing pages that people are completing. It has some integrations maybe to some webinar platforms, and there might be some integrations to some social platforms entering into the marketing automation platform that's aggregating all of those analytics and looking at those touch points from your members. And then you have an email marketing system, which is still there as your email workhorse, right? And so your marketing automation platform is there for lead gen and really trying to drive revenue, whereas your email marketing system is there for maybe those transactional emails that are going out for renewals, or maybe those informational type of emails that just need to go out to all your members just to inform them, but may not have a a direct call to action to anything, and that doesn't necessarily fit well inside the marketing automation, because the key thing is cost, right? And so marketing automation platforms are, the cost is determined by how many contacts that you have in your system, whereas the email systems are determined how much the cost is determined on how many emails you send out, right? And so you want to keep your costs low, because they can be significant, in terms of if you've got 100,000 members, to have that inside a marketing automation platform will be very costly. And so if you only have maybe 20–25% of your total membership that's really engaged into your content, those are the ones that need to be inside of the marketing automation platform and your potential leads, right? And so you don't need, so maybe only 20,000 people are here, but the whole 100,000 are inside of the email marketing system. And then this is a cool way of kind of integrating your stack together, because now you can plug in any platform into this stack that allows, the integration to kind of take the data and flow through all the different systems. And so we kind of spun this up with a lot of the different clients of late. And so this style of kind of splitting up your portfolio, or having your ecosystem together centered around your AMS has worked well for a lot of clients. And so we do this a survey every year. It's up again, excuse me. And we survey close to 300 marketers in different organizations and so forth. And we ask some general questions around digital marketing, right? And so one of the key things we ask is, what tools do they use inside of their kind of portfolio, right? And email has been, or the email newsletter has been dominant for years. And that's something that's pretty consistent across the board. And so you see that what this diagram does show is that, there's email and social are kind of the top items, but you can also see that there is a lot of tools that you're using inside of your stack. And it's about having that marketing automation platform in place to really tie in your ecosystem. So you got your marketing automation platform that's really kind of keeping these together. And then you have your AMS that's there for the demographic and membership information, which is really your base. And then you have that email platform to kind of disseminate the workhorse emails there. So the interesting thing is that email newsletters stays as a high mark in terms of using this as a tool in your stack. And so that's why it's important to kind of keep that email platform in place, because when you're sending out those newsletters, you're typically sending it out to all your members. And so not all your members are going to be in your marketing automation platform. So that's why that new kind of integrated stack is important, where you're kind of plugging in different platforms into your stack and keeping them integrated through an integration. And so the tools that you're using inside of your ecosystem, again, the customer doesn't really know that they're there. They just know that they want a consistent experience no matter what tool you use. They don't know what tool you're using. They just know that from a user standpoint, they want to have a consistent voice. They want to have a consistent brand. And they want to have a consistent experience with your organization. So no matter if I read a newsletter, or I'm downloading an ebook, or I'm reading a blog, that same tone of voice, that same type of brand is consistent across all of the different platforms. And what we'll talk about is, how does this really work in terms of your strategy, and how do you use these different platforms, whether you're using it from a multi-channel platform or from an omni-channel platform, right? Because you can quickly see that this may have different people using these different systems, right? And so one person might be using the email marketing system, while the one person might be using, the marketing automation platform to, generate landing pages, or, you got a different team on the CMS. And, if everybody's not on the same page and everybody's not on the same goal, these can have an inconsistent experience really quickly. And so we'll talk a little bit about what it means to be multi-channel versus omni-channel, because you can have a lot of different channels in your marketing technology stack, but it's about keeping that, remember that graphic, it's about keeping that member in the center of all of those technologies, because that's who you're contacting. That's the experience that you want to give them. You want to make sure that member is member-centric and keeping them in that circle of all of the different channels. And so a lot of people use these two words interchangeably, but they're actually not the same thing, right? So you got multi-channel versus omni-channel, and they're actually two distinct things, right? And so there are two different schools of thought, right? And so the distinction there is based on how you're going to use the tools or the channels inside of your ecosystem. And so a multi-channel approach is really looking at it from a standpoint where you have these different lanes or different channels that you're communicating with, right? And so the member is getting a different experience in all of the different channels, right? And so in here, there's a quick little article. It's really neat article that kind of spells this out, and actually Suzanne had a talk about omni-channel versus multi-channel a couple months ago for ASAE. And so it's really this thought that that the user is getting a different experience in these different channels, and it's more operational in nature, right? And so the idea is that you're just using those tools to broadcast, right? And so you're not creating a consistent conversation with your users, right? So what you're doing is just broadcasting things out with the expectation that things may come back to you. Whereas Omni-channel is centered around the member, and then you're just branching out and trying to communicate and have a conversation with your users, rather than just blasting things out through each channel without any context, without it being timely, and so forth. And so if the buyer has multiple touch points within that ecosystem of a multi-channel setup, what happens is you got tracking that's happening in different channels, and you really can't track that well, and you really can't track your ROI well, right? And so you want to be able to capture all those touch points in one central area, so that you can use those touch points to do other communications based on those behaviors, right? And so what you don't want is to have siloed communication across those channels, and you want to keep that member in the center and have a lot of those conversations. I want to say it's less broadcast, but more conversational with that member. And so here is the benefits of the Omni-channel, right? And so here is what I'm talking about, right? And so you're being buyer-centric, right? And so you're creating a two-way communication between you and the buyer, right? And so the key thing here is having a ecosystem that connects through all of the platforms, right? And so you have, like we're saying, you have that technology stack, but you have integration across all those pieces that is allowing you to track any touch point across across any channel that you use, right? And so now you're really measuring that performance and seeing the ROI off of the different channels, right? And so that's the cool piece about being omni-channel, is that you have the member in the center and you're capturing all those touch points, and you're able to look at different channels and demonstrate ROI from each of those channels. And that's from a technology perspective, but from a marketing perspective, you have a consistent voice across those channels. And so that's the key thing, is having that voice. And I said it a couple times today, but having that voice and having that same brand across all the channels is important. And so I saw this stat, and it was, 56% of all the customers' interactions happen during a multi-event, multi-channel journey. So buyers are touching your organization, your association, through multiple channels, right? And so if you're set up from an omni-channel perspective, that person is going to have a consistent experience no matter what channel, whether they're on social, whether they're on their webinar, whether they're getting an email from you. The voice, the tone, the copy, the imagery, all of that is consistent across all of the channels. And so what we're going to do is talk a little bit about the buyer's journey, right? So we got our stack in order in terms of capturing all of those touch points. And I want to kind of walk you through a scenario. And this is a similar scenario that I detailed in a couple weeks ago with the e-commerce webinar that we did. And it's a really neat kind of buyer's journey. And we'll talk about how that buyer's journey and how we're collecting all those touch points across that journey, and what we're doing from a technology perspective to capture those touch points, but also talk a little bit about how the ROI can be tracked within that buyer's journey. And so what systems we need to have in place in order for us to capture all of those touch points in that buyer's journey. So, the marketer's role really is to just generate activity, right? And so the idea is that you're generating as much activity as you can to generate sales, right? The key thing is, being consistent and having a consistent voice across those different channels and generating all that activity. But the three things that kind of make up marketing is you really want to create a contextual, contextual copy for that given audience, right? So you don't want to just broadcast anything out. Being consistent and having a consistent voice requires you to be contextual to that audience, right? So that means dynamic content is being used for each of the different personas that you have within your organization. And then you want to attract the right audience, right? And so you have a specific audience that you're looking for in terms of leads for new members, or leads for the event that you're putting on. And so you know who you want at your event. And so it's just a matter of finding that right persona and matching that persona to the contextual content. And then if you generate enough activity and you have enough of that right content for the right audience, you're hopefully generating the right impulses and generating some type of people, what they call contagious content, right? And so people want to go to your blog or go to your website or go to your webinars because they're contagious. They're the content that is specific to you or to that person, and they want that consistent experience over and over and over again, and it becomes contagious for them, and then that hopefully turns into a lead. And so contacts is super important in this case. And along the buyer's journey, you got to make sure that you have contacts, and it's just not saying first name, right? You're looking at the buyer's history, you're looking at, or I should say the lead's history, and looking at some of the things that are happened and using that data to deliver some experiences that are timely with this contact. So if they purchased more than 2 products in the last 6 months, you use that information to deliver them a contextual email based upon that. All right. And so if they've been an early bird for the last 3 years, probability is that they're going to be an early bird this year, right? And so how do you deliver a message to them to get them to renew or be an early bird for that annual conference again, right? And so that's the mindset that you gotta be in when you're in the Omni-Channel. You have your integrated ecosystem. Your mindset has to shift to being contextual and timely and delivering a personalized experience well beyond just saying hello, first name, and putting that in the subject line, right? And so the buyer's journey is never linear, right? And this journey has several touch points across different channels that before a buyer even makes a purchase, right? And so what you want is a system in place to capture all of those touch points. And what's neat about marketing automation platforms, they allow you to trigger contextual messages based on those touch points. So you already know that it's going to be several touch points that the buyer is going to see, and the reason you want a consistent voice across all those different channels because the buyer is going to have several different touch points, right? So you already know that they're going to have different touch points with your organization across different channels. So now you have a consistent voice. Your marketing automation program is tracking all of those touch points. And so you got that being tracked inside of your ecosystem, all the different channels. And now what you do is trigger certain contextual emails based on those touch points, right? And so you're delivering a custom experience to these members or to these leads, and then that drives them to purchase, right? And so you got to get them at the top of the funnel and drive them down to the bottom of the funnel to get them to purchase, right? And then that whole funnel is captured in your reporting, and you're able to attribute all of that reporting against all of those different channels to demonstrate ROI on the activity that you're producing on all of those different channels. And so I saw this other stat that said that it takes up to about 8 content assets that a person views before they really start to buy from you, right? And so that's 8 touch points that a person will have with you before they actually purchase something. And so let's step through a little bit of a scenario, and I think that's pretty accurate in terms of how many touch points, and that's what we see with a lot of our clients as well, is that there will be about 8 times that they touch you before they actually buy something. And in those touch points, you'll see it can be really quick in terms of how many touch points, and that's why it's critical that you have a consistent experience across all those different channels. And so let's step through a scenario. This is a similar scenario that we had a couple weeks ago in terms of the buyer's journey and establishing that. And so let's step through one. It takes you through going from search engine all the way down to purchase. And so imagine I'm online and I'm doing a search for fundraising for advice and tips, right? And so I go to, I'm going to the website and I'm doing a Google search or Yahoo, right? And now I search for fundraising advice and tips, right? And what I land on is a blog, right? And couple of blogs about fundraising and so forth, really great articles. I stumbled upon this website. It's really awesome content. And I read a couple blogs. This is early in the morning. I still need to get on about my day, emails, responding, the daily life of associations, right? And so I read and I subscribe to the newsletter, right? And so because I really like their content, right? So I read about 2 or 3 blogs, I subscribed to their content, now I'm subscribed to their blog. At lunchtime, I go to YouTube, I'm just watching a video, and then on the right-hand side, I see an ad, and it's, 200 ideas for raising revenue, right? From the same blog that I was reading from, right? And so there's some context to that, right? So at that point in time, I was, early in the morning doing some searching for ideas on fundraising, and now they have a piece of content that I think I would need, because 200 ideas sounds pretty good in terms of, a wealth of knowledge that I would like to have, and it would help me out with my career and so forth. So I click on the ad, but I look at the book, I look at the page, I see it looks like it's a solid piece of content, but I don't purchase the product at that point in time. But I jump back to watch my video and finish watching my YouTube video, right? And then I go about my lunch and so forth. A couple hours later, I get an email, and it's an email that's a coupon for the 200 ideas of raising revenue, right? So it's contextual, it's in the moment. I click the link and I purchased the book. And so that's the type of experience. It's almost like a concierge-like experience. It's almost like it's almost like a friend that's giving you recommendations. I was asking for something, I was looking for something, I found some articles that helped me, and then there was an offer, kind of like what a friend would do and say, hey, I got a book that's perfect for exactly what you need, and here's the book, and here's a discount if you get it today, right? And so that's the type of experience that you want to create in that type of journey, and that's being omni-channel, right? There's different channels that were represented inside that journey, and I was able to capture all the analytics across that journey, right? I was able to capture all of those touch points on my traffic in the marketing automation platform on that journey. And so my ecosystem is working all together, right? And so what's cool here, I laid out kind of in a sequential form of all the touch points, right? And so I searched Google, right? I read a blog, a couple of blogs actually, right? I subscribed to the newsletter, I clicked on the ad, and then I read an email, I clicked the CTA link, and I viewed the product page. Those were all of the different touch points that were captured while I was, throughout that 24-hour experience with this specific organization, right? And so then I went ahead and added the product to the cart and paid and so forth, and I went from a lead to a customer. Now, this might not happen as fast as this, but I think you guys get the point in terms of how many touch points it takes to actually get that person to become a customer. And the second point there is that this can happen not as fast as this, but it can happen over a course of weeks or a course of months. And so you want to be able to capture all of these. And that's why I keep harping on the point that you have to have a consistent voice, is because, each time I interacted with this organization, with these blogs or with the newsletter, or when I went to their website, I needed to have a consistent experience, right? And so that's why I say you always have to have that same voice and that same tone in terms of your copy and so forth that speaks to that persona. And so in this case here, I enjoyed the content. I enjoyed the fact that they sent me an email with the discount, and I purchased the product. And so really what we're talking about is the life of the lead, right? And we're capturing all the touch points through that lead, right? And so whether they're already a customer or they haven't purchased anything from you yet, you want to be able to capture those touch points within within some type of software, and that software is a marketing automation software. Those are what they're built for, is really to capture those touch points from different channels. And in this example here from the HIghRoad Marketing Cloud is that, you can see all of the touch points that, Ron McGrath is getting, from the time that he came into our platform to the time that he's received the different communications across the last few days, right? And so you can see that he's had 17 touch points with our organization. So that's where you got to get to in terms of kind of capturing, and you're focused around the member, and you're being member-centric, you're being user-centric, buyer-centric, lead-centric, and you're keeping that person in the center of all of your different channels. And so let's talk a little bit about how it's working, right? Talk a little bit about from how the marketing perspective, how that was being tracked from my interaction with the website and going to the blog. But now let's talk a little bit about the interaction and the inner workings and the interconnectivity of all of these different channels and how they work, right? And so in this case here, when I did my search into the fundraising, into Google for fundraising advice and tips, the cool thing here is that I can attribute my traffic to Google, for instance, and that's the neat thing here, is that you can do this with Google Analytics and those types of things and see where your source traffic is coming from. And the same goes for the marketing automation platform. So now I can attribute that sale that I had as a search engine sale, right? The lead came from, the initial touch point came from a search engine. And so I capture that inside the marketing automation platform. And then the marketing automation platform tracks the page visit, right? And so we talked a couple weeks ago in terms of how this really works. And so there's a cookie that gets set on the web pages. It's similar to Google Analytics. You install some tracking script on their website, and it tracks all of the activity that's happening on your web pages. And that's how that integration happens with the marketing automation platform. So a lot of the integration is built around cookies and built around that JavaScript tracking script that sits on your web page. And so within this buyer's journey, it's capturing all of the page views, right? So I went to maybe 2 or 3 blogs and I read those. Those page views would be listed on my profile, right? And so now I have the source of those page views being Google, and you can attribute those, page views to Google, my search engine optimization, having really good content and being high on certain pages for that keyword. And now you can kind of see that inside the marketing automation platform. And then keep in mind, I did subscribe to the newsletter, right? And so when I subscribed, that's when I captured the lead, right? And so that's important there, that you have some way on your websites to capture leads, right? So you have either landing pages that do this for you, or you have some type of subscription that allows you to capture that lead. What happens there is that email address is super important. That is the golden ticket, if you will. That is that person or that member or that lead saying they want to communicate with you, right? That's the conversation starter. That's that person giving you their phone number, their email address, saying, hey, let's talk, right? And so that is where the conversation starts. Up until this point, I was anonymous, but now that it knows who I am, there's some context that can happen with a lot of the communications that begin to happen. And what also starts to happen is what we call lead scoring. And so you can attribute some points to certain touch points. And so the scoring points will be attributed to all the different touch points that I happen or interact with the website, as well as some preset scoring options based on some demographic fields, So what's cool here is that if the marketing automation platform is connected to your AMS, right, you can bring in that content from that lead and now attribute some demographic fields to that person. So that's the cool part of having that integration in place with the AMS. And so now the system or the marketing automation platform knows who I am, and it's capturing the lead. In terms of when I was on YouTube looking at that video, I had Google Tag Manager sitting on my website, as well as the retargeting components for my ad network. And that allowed me to deliver some contextual ads based on my traffic to different properties out there, right? So the way Google retargeting works is if I went to a specific website, and based on my traffic on that website can give me contextual ads based on my traffic history on that website. So if you've ever been on Amazon, for instance, and kind of viewed a couple products and then went on Facebook and saw that that product was sitting inside of an ad, that's the same type of Google ad network that's happening. The retargeting ads are happening within that ad. And so that's the cool thing about this, is that you can deliver a contextual ad based on the browsing history of that lead. And so what happens there, if that ad is contextual to the point where it's solving a problem for that member, or answering questions that they were asking from initially doing their search, it becomes more valuable at that point, and it has a higher probability of them clicking through that ad, right? And so the cool thing about this is I'm using a whole different channel to communicate with leads. But the thing is, I'm being consistent in my voice because now I'm being contextual with my ad. And the other component to this is, as well, is that once I click on that ad, I can attribute that traffic, that web traffic in my marketing automation platform to this ad. And that's the cool piece. And having that history, that buyer journey history, I can also attribute the initial touch point to the SEO, to Google doing the search engine, right? Search. So that's the cool piece about having all of those touch points go back into your marketing automation platform. And so now that I got lead scoring in, I know who this person is, I can do some things contextually with the email, and I can be more contextual than just saying, hello, Adam. In email, I can deliver an email that delivers a coupon and a product for them to purchase, right? And so it has a clear call to action to go and buy that book. And so that's how all of that works, right? And that's the interconnectivity that's happening throughout those ecosystems. We had email, we have we have the marketing automation platform, we have the AMS that's bringing in some demographics into the marketing automation platform. We have your search engine optimization, your website, your blogs, you got ads. So a lot of different things are happening in this experience, and it's a lot of things going on in terms of in the background to make all these things happen. But from a buyer's perspective, he or she is just having a conversation with this organization, asking them, hey, I need help with this in Google, and you're giving that lead some helpful guidance with your blogs, and then in turn you're selling them a book that's also helpful to them in their career or so forth. And so that's how all of this interconnectivity for your ecosystem works. And so the cool part about this too is that you can score all of these touch points, right? And what's important is that these touch points, you do this setup once you kind of get started into your marketing automation platform. And according to SharpSpring, you know, organizations that use the scoring feature, right, and scoring all of their touch points experience a 77% increase in lead generation. So their ROI increases that much just based upon using the scoring system. And why that's important is because having that scoring feature in place allows you to be more contextual and more timely. It lets you know when to communicate with that specifically, right? So being able to capture all of the touch points and then understanding how those touch points are ranked according to you, right? And you know, certain things are ranked higher than others. A page view might be ranked lower than a click on a call to action, for instance. And so you ranking those options allows you to see where this lead is at across all of your leads and determine when is a timely point to go after and make a request, like ask in the email to go purchase a product. If my touch points weren't high enough, or I didn't have enough of a lead score, maybe I don't want to send him or her a email just yet to say, hey, go and buy this book. Maybe I want them to engage in a couple other content assets before I ask them to go and purchase something. So lead scoring is super important into increasing the ROI on a lot of your different channels and so forth, in creating a lot of those leads. And so what you do is in the system, you just attribute all the different touch points that you have, or all the different channels that you have, and determine how you want to score those, right? And you just put it on a weighted system. And then what you get back is basically a profile on your leads, and you're basically looking at your leads on a weighted scale at this point, right? And so in this example here, you can see that, you know, Ron has completed a lot of forms, right? 135 points forms, but forms are weighted a little higher, right? And so because you're actually getting some information out of that person at that point in time. So maybe forms are weighted higher than maybe a page view or maybe a video watch, right? And so, but you're able to capture all of these and see all of these and see how a person is engaging with you, and seeing that across all the different channels, whether it's, you know, media and videos, or whether it's certain landing page forms where they're getting information and downloading some ebooks or some type of white paper from you. And then you get to see all of these constituents, all these leads on a bell curve, right? And so you can use that to do some predictive analytics, really to kind of gauge who is your buyers based on these lead scores, right? And so that's the cool piece about lead scoring and how it's helpful for generating better ROI, is that you know who your audience is, and determining where your highly engaged audience is, and then looking at your least engaged and finding those commonalities with the least engaged and seeing what those commonalities are. And maybe your content or maybe your organization isn't a perfect match for those people. And now you know what to, you know who not to contact, right? And so you can kind of eliminate that audience and focus on the people that are highly engaged and look at the attributes that make up them, and then turn that into a persona so that you can attract more of those people, right? So we're looking at we're going to score the buyer's journey, right? And so it's that same workflow that we went through, right? And so you search Google, you know, you read a blog, right? So you score that 10 points. Subscribing to a newsletter, maybe you score that 50 points, right? And so you're scoring all of those different touch points with different values to come up with an aggregated score, right? And so at the end of the day, you have this kind of complete score on that specific journey, but across the entire life of the lead, you have all of these touch points, and then you're aggregating it and you're using, just as we demonstrated before, whether you're looking at these, looking at it from a high level and trying to find a specific audience, or profiling a specific lead, you really have a good indicator of how engaged this person is with your organization based on the score that is sitting on their profile, right? So that's super important, because that helps you be timely and helps you be contextual with a lot of the communication, the email communications that you send to these customers. And so the last component of this is really attributing this marketing activity to the overall goal, to the overall objective of your organization, right? And so here, what we want to do is get past the vanity metrics. And we've been saying this for a couple of years now. And so the vanity metrics for us is really these opens, the clicks, the page views, what people really call hits, right? And these hits, you know, they show activity, but they don't necessarily show true value. And what show true value are the insight-driven analytics, which are, you know, conversion rate, campaign revenue, you know, ROI, those types of metrics that you want to kind of look at, and you want to get past those vanity metrics and get into some of those insight-driven metrics to really tell you how your performance is doing, right? So the vanity metrics illustrate that you are producing a lot of activity, but what you want to do is illustrate how well that activity is performing. And, you know, conversion rate, campaign revenue, and your overall ROI on a lot of the activity that you're doing is better to look at than the vanity metrics. And what's hard about doing this is that if you're on a multi-channel track, it's very hard to kind of capture these metrics, especially campaign revenue or ROI, right? And so it's very difficult to do that. So that's why you got to be omni-channel and have the member sitting at the center and capturing all those touch points from the member, and then looking at it from a global perspective of all the different touch points that person is doing. And remember, there's multiple touch points that a person can have with you, and it's not within one channel, it's always happening with different channels. So being able to capture all of those touch points becomes important to capture these insight-driven analytics. And so the state of digital marketing that we did, you know, for over the last 3 years, it's been pretty consistent with the vanity metrics that stay pretty high. And what we want to see is people move from, you know, from the vanity area and be a little bit more on the ROI and insight-driven area, right? And so you got conversions, you got ROI that are sitting somewhat low, but the people really use click-through, open rates, page views, and page visitors, and those types of things to kind of gauge their performance. And really, they should be looking at some of those things like conversions and so forth to be more insight-driven, right? And so, yeah, you want to demonstrate the activity that you're producing, but you also want to tie your activity to your bottom line, to your overall goals, and that means real revenue, right? And demonstrating some real value. In terms of seeing these in platforms, what you want to be able to see is, you know, revenue attributed to a campaign. And we're not just talking about an email campaign that you're sending out. When you're talking about a campaign, you're talking about all the channels, right? And so you're looking at your campaign from all the channels out there from an omni perspective, and that encompasses all the touch points. And you want to see revenue sources to all of those touch points, right? And so you want to be able to say that you generated 15 grand, you know, from this specific campaign, right? And so that's where you want to get to, versus saying you generated, you know, 1,500 clicks or 1,500, you know, page views. You want to say you generated $15,000 based upon the marketing activity that you created, right? And then going back to kind of the model that, or the buyer's journey example that we're going through, this is what you would want, you know, to demonstrate, right? Because we could easily say that, look at all of the click traffic that was happening inside of an email, but really where we would want to get to is say that email generated $1,400, right? Or this email types of fundraising generated $20,000 over the last year, right? You can say those types of things and be able to speak to those types of things will demonstrate real value from your marketing efforts, okay? And then, you know, what you want to do is align your campaigns with goals. And so the campaigns align with your goals, so you would, you know, match up all of your campaigns in the platform to the overarching goals with the organization or within the department, right? And so if it was to grow product sales by 5% in the next year, that's the goal that you would set for that campaign. And you want to be able to speak to that on a monthly basis or a quarterly basis or a yearly basis within the platform to really see if you're really generating revenue and really boosting product sales for up to 5%, right? And so the cool thing about this is that you can be agile and look at your campaigns and say, oh, this is working or this isn't working, and you can start to kind of tweak things here and there to kind of make sure that you're kind of tuning up your different campaigns to hopefully meet your goals, right? And so that's really where you want to get to in terms of really matching your ecosystem to getting to a point where you can demonstrate ROI, right? And so you get to this point here where you can definitively say that you grew product sales to 5% based on these channels or based on these systems. That means your ecosystem is fine-tuned and it's working, and you have it interconnected, and you have integration flowing and data flowing through all these systems. And now you can really demonstrate ROI and have finite numbers and be able to say, I did this amount of revenue for the year, or I grew, or I met my goal. And that's really where we want to get to. And so that's the goal. That's where we want to take a lot of our clients, right? We want to move them from just doing kind of the base vanity metrics and get them into a spot where they can be more insight driven and more focused on how their activity is driving revenue. So that's pretty much it in terms of today. I mean, it's a Friday, so, you know, thank you guys. We're just going to pretty much wrap up here. You know, thank you again for, you know, coming out and on a Friday afternoon. And if there's any questions, just hit me on Twitter or shoot an email to me. I know we ran out a little bit of time. We're at the hour here, and so enjoy your weekend, enjoy your Friday, and thanks again for attending the HIghRoad. All right, have a good one.